Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, colleges face reckoning as plummeting birth rate worsens enrollment declines. An amazing article by Jon Marcus of the Hechinger Report. The question from a listener is, are there lower threshold programs similar to the Trinity Dublin 2+2 BA program? This is the second part of the Trinity Dublin two-part series started last week. Our interview is with Christina Lopez, the Dean of Enrollment of Barnard College, on Barnard College. And our college spotlight will be Barnard College.
Okay, friends, before we kick it off, I do have to just serenade and celebrate my main man here. You don't even know this, Dave, but this episode represents 1.5 years, 1.5 years now. You've been an official weekly member of our team, so congratulations.
Oh, that should have been the big number.
Don't let it get to your head.
Make me the big number.
Megalomaniac, egomaniac on me over here.
Of course, with the big number, we got to separate that into days. That would be like 400 and some odd days. Well, it's been a joy, my friend. It's been a total joy. And here's to many more.
What you guys don't realize, Dave's such a natural for this part of the podcast because, I mean, he's not even a college admission counselor, but throughout the week, he sends me on average 2 or 3 articles on college admissions that he's just reading on his own. He sends me the text. So he sends me a bunch of other things too, on every imaginable thing from the economy to real estate to politics. But ever since I can remember, he's always had a book in front of his head. And so you benefit from it. And so his intellectual curiosity makes him the perfect guy to do the In the News.
Well, it is added to my bathroom reading list.
Okay, so I want to mention a few announcements that we have to kick things off this week. Some of these are not new announcements. Some of them are reminders, and one of them will be new. And so I want to mention that on July 29th, we will be kicking off our sessions for college admissions counselors for us to sort of brainstorm and be a little bit of a think tank and a support group for each other. We're going to do these every 6 months. And so I'm asking if you haven't sent an email to questions at Your College Bound Kid, and you're a college counselor or an admission officer, either one, and you're interested in participating, please do that. Send an email to questions at yourcollegebouндkid.com and say interested in participating. It's going to be from 9. We're going to go till 10:30. If you can't stay the whole time, that's okay. Eastern time on Thursday, July 29th. So very excited about that and getting a good response. But I know there's several more of you out there that we'd love to have in our little confab. So that's the first announcement, July 29th. July 29th is another big day. That should be when our YouTube channel goes live.
All right.
And so we've got... originally, it was 2 members of the team. Now it's 3. They've added a 3rd member of the team. They're working assiduously on this. Literally, we have over 900 segments. When we take our In the News, our question from a listener, remember the book chapters? That was the first 171 episodes. Our book chapters, our interviews, and our college spotlights. And what will happen on the YouTube channel is that each one of those will be its own individual video. So you don't want to hear the whole episode, just want to hear one segment. You'll be able to do it. And then starting with this current interview, the Christina Lopez interview, our interviews will be live interviews. You hear them, of course, ought to be on the podcast. But if you want to see what Christina looks like or how we interact or pick up nonverbals, those are going to be going up on the YouTube channel. And I'm trying to convince Dave to have our segments recorded. We're working behind the scenes on that. So we'll see if I'm successful. I'd love to, on episode 200 for us to record our segments live, but to be determined on that one. Dave's pretty wedded to his phone right now, and so he's got addicted to the travel lifestyle.
That's right, man. Well,
You still there, my man?
Well, we can still do it. I just
Yeah.
have to make sure I shave and wash my face and I look YouTubeable.
There's a new term, YouTubeable.
It's right.
The next announcement for this week, which is a new one, very excited about this. I'm just going to plant the seed now. Had a meeting about it earlier this week. Expect details to follow. I am working really closely with Appleruth, which is one of the nation's leading tutoring and test prep companies. You may remember Jed Appleruth, the founder and CEO, came on our podcast, back in 2018 and did a fantastic breakdown of how the ACT and the SAT are different. You won't find a better breakdown than that anywhere. But Appleruth's going to do something really special for us. They're going to basically host a mock exam. We're talking right now, will it be ACT, will it be SAT? But they'll group proctor it for us. Everybody will take it collectively, and they'll give you a score report. So with a breakdown, and we're actually talking about having one of their leaders talk to parents while the students are in the session, taking some questions and answers about the test. So sure, it's great for a parent. A parent can proctor at home. I'm always encouraging that, but you kind of get the group feel by doing it this way, which simulates more of the real experience. And then you get this test score breakdown, the analysis. So very excited about that. We're looking at doing that. It's going to either be in August or September. If it's September, it'll be earlier part of September. So we're just working on nailing those dates down, but expect some more information to come on that. Before I transition to my admissions tip, admissions vernacular, and the big number, Dave, it's time to call on you, the doc. We've got two doctors on this podcast now. I'm the only one without a doctor. I have 2 master's degrees, but I'm not as educated as my 2 co-hosts. So they say surround yourself with people better than you. So that's what I try to do. But Dave, I want to share with our listeners what's going on with this Delta variant.
Well, the Delta variant, as we know, COVID mutates, and so it comes out with a variety of variants. We had the South Africa variant. We had some that was located in South America and so forth. So the newest variant is a Delta variant. The good news is that if you have been vaccinated with any of the major vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, you are covered. The data out of Israel and other places show that though people can still be infected with the Delta variant if you're vaccinated, most of those infections are asymptomatic or very mild. So that's the good news. The bad news is that if you are not vaccinated, this particular strain of COVID is definitely more infectious and in some cases more deadly. So we are now in a paradigm where we have the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And if you are not vaccinated, this Delta variant is serious news. It's the predominant variant now in Europe. It's ravaging much of Africa and the third world. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see it really exacerbating the divide in this country because we are already seeing rises in COVID infections, particularly in those states that have low vaccination rates. And I think this is going to accelerate as we come into the fall, really underscoring the need to get over this political divide that we have on the vaccines. I mean, the Delta variant makes it very clear you need to get vaccinated.
So here's the question. Should we be going back to wearing masks? Because I'll be honest, I'm taking my mask off. I'm vaccinated. I'm good.
Yeah.
But then I was watching someone who said that even that you're protected for the most part from you can still catch it, with the vaccine, but you're unlikely to be hospitalized or have serious complications. It said you still could be an asymptomatic transmitter. So you could be, so wouldn't it be the selfless thing to do to protect yourself from those that aren't vaccinated to wear a mask? I mean, I kind of don't want to do it, but maybe it's a selfless thing for me to do.
Well, you've hit on a major controversy. The World Health Organization is currently recommended that we go back to masks. However, the CDC says that masks at this time are not necessary, and it is a point of vigorous debate. My personal feeling is that if you are among the vaccinated, if you are on social settings, casual social settings, I don't think at this time we need to go back to wearing masks. Now, that doesn't mean that this might not change in the future. The other concern is that because you can be an asymptomatic carrier of the Delta variant, even if you are vaccinated, healthcare workers such as myself may need to continue wearing masks, particularly in settings in which you may have vulnerable unvaccinated people. So, for example, if you're a healthcare worker, even if you're vaccinated, and you are dealing with people who are immunocompromised or for whatever reason cannot take the vaccine, and obviously you're interacting with them on a daily basis, then yes, we continue to wear masks in the hospital for that reason. Whether this means that come the fall, when we have a spike, we're going to continue to wear masks on planes and on certain modes of transportation, unfortunately, I think the answer is going to be yes. Whether that mask wearing extends to restaurants, I think at this time, probably no. So it's a mixed message. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that hears you. I went ahead and bought 50 more KN95 masks the other day. Just not so much for myself, but more to protect others when I'm in real social settings. So, but I was enjoying being maskless for about the last, feels like I've been maskless for about 2 months now. And so it is what it is. But I guess everybody's got to make their own decision.
One thing my wife did point out was that we went a whole year without anybody in the family getting a major cold. And one of the beneficial effects of masks is that besides preventing people from getting COVID, it's proven remarkably effective in cutting down the common cold and the flu, especially in increased social settings. That's why in many Asian countries after the avian flu, they continued to wear masks because it cut down on transmission of all sorts of diseases. I got to think that, if I was traveling on the subway every day, I continue to wear a mask only because if I can avoid getting a cold or flu, that's great. I definitely continue to wear masks on planes simply because you're in such a confined space. And unfortunately, we know that COVID is not going to be the last transmissible pandemic type disease. So, am I going to continue to wear masks at home? No. Am I going to continue to wear masks when I'm out to dinner with my friends and family and those I love? No. But if I'm in a mass social setting, especially in a close confined space, would I think masking would be beneficial both for myself and for the immediate surroundings? Yeah, I think I do. So I think masks on a selective application are a reality that we are, it's part of our new reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're exactly where I am. I mean, I'm not wearing a mask at homes. I'm not wearing masks at restaurants. And I may not even wear them at the grocery store, but I'm going to wear them on an elevator and I'm going to wear them on a plane. And if I'm in close confinement, that's me. But I think everybody's got to make their own decision. We're not here to be sanctimonious and preach at people.
Yes, yes.
Everyone's got to sort of do what they're comfortable with. So,
yeah. But the need for vaccination for the Delta variant is very clear. And, at the end of the day, someone had a very good point. When people talk about, I have a right not to wear a mask because that's my right. If you went into a doctor's office and the doctor all of a sudden wasn't wearing gloves or decided not to wash
that's a good one.
with surgery, would you accept his explanation? Well, it's my right as an American not to have to wear gloves when I examine you.
Right. Well put.
So,
I mean, I go back to the simple axiom, your right to swing your fist stops where my face starts,
absolutely.
You don't have that right. So there we go. All right. Let's get back in our lane.
Yes.
Of course, it is your lane. You live in that world, but get back in my lane. Let's put it that way. And we'll turn our attention to the topic at hand. All right. So our admissions tip. And the admissions tip it has to do with how you can assess whether a college is on shaky ground or stable ground. Now, over the years, we've shared many methods. We've shared at least 3 very, very helpful websites that assess the financial health, including one by the Hechinger Report. That's outstanding. I've also said, watch out for private schools with very poor endowments. Be careful of schools that have 2 of the following 3 risk factors: low endowments, remote location, and very low name recognition. However, there's a basic one that I haven't shared, and it's our tip of the week. Study the enrollment trend for any school you're considering. Tuition is still the number one thing that funds the whole operation. And so are the numbers going down, or are they staying the same or going up? And the way you do that, the best way to do it is to just take any name of any college you're interested in. Name any college, Dave. I'm going to name one. I'll name one for
University of Oklahoma.
Okay, there you go. University of Oklahoma. All right. So what you do is do a Google search, University of Oklahoma, common data set. Now, not every school participates, but majority do. Because there's no one single website. You can't just go to commondataset.org, .edu, .com. That doesn't exist. But it's usually on a school's website. Okay. And when you get to Common Data Set, you want to go to Section B. That's the enrollment section. And normally when you pull it up, you'll see the data listed for multiple years. So just click the last 3 years, 4 years if you want, and look at the numbers. You can track the numbers by freshman admission, overall admission, female admission, male admission, transfer admission. It's all there. And a healthy school should be staying the same or increasing. There are a few rare occasions where a school intentionally chooses to downsize, but that's so rare it almost doesn't, note being mentioned. But that's a very, very, very easy, simple, and insightful way to see if the trends are good. And Dave, I know we'll come back to that because obviously Becker College comes up in the news. For admissions vernacular, Dave's on a streak of losing one in a row. And my new goal is to get you to miss 3 times in a row. 3 strikes and you're out. Baseball.
No, so man. I'm like Giannis, man. You ain't going to get me 3-0. I'm back on my home turf, man. Come on,
we'll
Phoenix.
We're
fighting back.
The word of the day is spiky. Spiky. What is spiky?
I think I got spiky. Spiky means you're a particular candidate that has one particular quality or one particular talent that really comes through very clearly. So, for example, you might be the national debating champion. You may not be a great athlete. You may not be the best X, Y, and Z, but the one thing you do really well that makes you spiky.
So before I announced admissions vernacular, I had a smile on my face. You wiped the smile right off my face, dude, by getting it right.
I told you, man, we're 2-1 with Phoenix. We're coming back.
So there are a number of terms for this. When you think of you think of the Renaissance man or woman, the well-rounded student. They're very good at a number of things, but not necessarily great at one. This is the opposite of that. And there are so many different terms. We've had them all on admissions vernacular now. We've used the term angular, which is the same thing. We've used the term well lopsided, which is the same thing. We've used the term pointy, which is the same thing. And so this is another word, spiky or spiked. The applicant was spiked, meaning that they went all in on one thing and they went really deep, as opposed to the person that's more the well-rounded student. Knowing that colleges mostly are looking for a well-rounded class, more so than a well-rounded student. But even that's an oversimplification because they always do take some well-rounded students. All right, enough on that.
Think about superheroes. We can't all be Superman, with all these different gifts. But you could be Wolverine because if you can just slash with your adamantine knives, that could be enough to defeat even the best supervillain. So there you go.
I just had a flashback from when Dave and I were really young, like 6, 7, 8, 9. He used to watch Star Trek all the time, and I hated that show. Always talking about Star Trek. Now you just took me back to our kids when we were kids, and you were into Star Trek.
Yeah. So now I'm just taking you into the MCU universe. Of course, you don't watch movies, so you have no idea what I'm talking about. For all you MCU guys, that's why Marvel always is much better than DC, because Marvel comics, the superheroes always have that one unique skill, whereas DC, they just try and throw out everything. So, it's much better as a superhero read.
So you just went over my head completely. I don't have a clue what you talked about, but I did discover that when I'm on my exercise bike, I kind of like watching movies. So maybe you have to give me a few that I've missed out on, and maybe I can get in touch with the modern world and know what's going on. So that's my new thing.
Yeah, you have 50 years to catch up on, but we'll see.
It's not going to happen. All right. For our big number, we're also going to draw off something related to our article. Last week, we had 2.2 million, and that meant there were 2.2 million more women than men in college. Well, we're topping it this week. It's 2.5 million. What is that? 2.5 million is the drop. It's between 2.5 and 2.6. It's actually probably closer to 2.6. So I'll call it 2 points. It's between the two. It's the drop in college students since 2011. In 2011, there were 20 million students in college. Now the number is closer to 17.4. Almost a $2.6 million drop. See, I got money on the line. A 2.6 million drop. And that is a perfect segue for our article today, Dave. Take it away.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
And it is by a good friend, Jon Marcus of the Hechinger Report. Colleges face reckoning as plummeting birth rate worsen enrollment declines. So this article starts with the sad story of Becker College. Becker College was started in 1784 in Worcester, Massachusetts. And despite doing some changes like having an innovative program in game design, last year it closed. It closed after its full-time graduates fell 21% in the past 5 years to 1,250. And it closed after giving virtually every single student a tuition discount of some sort. Why did it close? Well, Becker College said that it was because COVID-19, where they had more dropouts, more students not showing up, and so forth. But the article says that this is not the full story. By focusing only on COVID, it obscures the demographic downturn that has already been squeezing colleges and universities for the last decade. In the past 10 years, the number of students in colleges have decreased, as Mark said, 2.6 million, 13%. Another drop of 11 to 15% is projected beginning in 2025 due to the drop in births from the last 2008 recession. And now, grim new birth rate data reflects that this could be even worse. According to the latest data, 34% of women said that they delayed childbearing during the pandemic and can have fewer children, and almost half of all adults said they were having less sex since the pandemic. The number of births continued to decline, down to 142,000, or down 4% last year, which is the lowest point since 1979. And this southern downturn follows an almost uninterrupted 150-year growth in the number of higher education programs and universities and rising tuition without consequence. Add on top of that the drop in international enrollment since 2015, and Americans' increasingly skeptical view of the return on investment for higher education. 57% of students said that they did not think colleges were worth the money, and an increasingly partisan view of the value of education. The Republicans are doubling down on stupid, basically. And what we have is what Jon Marcus describes as any hopes of a rebound is fading fast.
All right, Dave, that was a fantastic summary. And it's actually a really important conversation. And it's one that I feel we haven't had that much on the podcast, Dave, because, we've talked a lot about the demographic cliff, the expected drop off that's expected in 2026, with kids. And we've talked a lot about the birth dearth, but one thing we haven't talked about that much is that this has been in effect for 11 years now.
It has.
From this whole decade, from 2011 hitting 20 million down to 17.4. And another thing that we haven't talked about, and I think it's important, and this article clearly talks about it, is, why is this drop occurring? And one of the big reasons why you see a drop occur, and I don't really remember us emphasizing it, at least not as much as we should, is because when there are calamitous times in society, people decide to have less kids. They just do. So, when the stock market really, really struggled around 2000, that big drop, you saw a correlation with people probably saw their finances impacted. and there were less births occurring. And it really happened during the global financial crisis. 2007, 8, and 9, people have less babies. And we're seeing it at even a more unprecedented level in COVID. And it gave many of the reasons. Some of them were people's finances and wondering if they could afford kids. But I mean, Dave read the quote. 34% of women said they have delayed childbearing plans or would have fewer children. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. And almost half the adults surveyed by Kinsey said they're having less sex. So we're not the sex podcast here, Dave, but when it relates to college admissions, we'll talk about it. We'll go there.
Absolutely.
You know? and so when times are tough, people have less kids. And we'll touch on this a little bit later, but the article also talked about there's a correlation between single moms and low income having even less kids too, showing once again the correlation between financial constraints and kids. And so this is going to present a massive problem for colleges. We're seeing it already. The article featured Becker College, but it also alluded to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's been having major conversations about widespread mergers within their public education system. And you're going to see a combination of a lot of things. You're going to see mergers, you're going to see closures, and you're going to see downsizing. You're going to see all three of them, mergers, closures, and downsizing. I mean, the demographic cliff was already bad. The birth dearth was already bad. But look at the birth numbers coming out of this year in the pandemic. They exceed anything that was projected before. And this is by all of the experts in the field, whether it's Nathan Graw out of Carleton or Witchy that does major research on this type of demographic trends and has so for over 30 years, coming out of the Western states, or the National Clearinghouse, Student Clearinghouse. Like all the data presents, points to the same thing. And so this has put colleges in a unique predicament. And I was thinking of an analogy, and this is the one that popped in my mind. Let's say Dave decides he's got a lawn care business. He's going to stop the real estate, stop the doctor stuff. He's going to have a lawn care business. And he's just humming along. He's got 150 clients. Life is good. And all of a sudden, there's a downturn in the economy. His client load goes from 150 to 120, 120 to 90, 190 to 60. And now he's down to 30. Well, guess what? If he's got 30 clients, he can't lose another client. So one of the positives that's coming out of this is it's making colleges up their game and do certain things that they have never had to do before, because there have been 150 straight years of growth in the college up until recently. And even in this last decade, you've gone from 63% of high school grads going to college to 69. But the problem is going from 63 to 69 is not enough to counteract these forces. So Dave's down to 30 clients on his lawn care business now. What is he going to do? He may survey all of them to find out what can I do to provide better service for you. He's certainly not going to increase his prices. Maybe he'll add some additional services. Maybe he'll, increase his customer service in multiple different ways, because each one of those is precious and they're like gold and you just cannot afford to lose them. And so that's the position that the majority of colleges are in. Don't believe the hype. You have to understand all the articles about Harvard and Stanford and the University of Chicago, and Duke and the UCs and all of the glut of applicants that they get. That is the 5% of the population. That's the 1 in 20. The 19 in 20 are either struggling or treading water. And that's where the vast majority are. Yes, it's a proven fact. If you're a writer and you write for one of the major publications, you got to get clicks. And you get clicks writing more about Stanford or Harvard than you do, by writing about Becker College. So there's a lot more articles out there on acceptance rate drops to all-time low at Columbia this year, Students banging down the door Northwestern as they admit their most selective class. Like that kind of thing gets clicks. So you tend to have an inordinate amount of coverage, which gives a skewed view as to what's really, really going on in higher ed. And so if there's a positive in this, and there is a positive, it's what schools are doing as a result of it. And so Um, Dave, you've identified several things the article addresses to say what colleges are doing to combat this phenomenon. You want to introduce them? I think you in our pre-meeting you said you had five. You want to go one by
Sure.
one?
Let's go one by one. So let's
Sure.
start with the biggest one right here. Flatten or lower student costs. And in an era where the article said we had a 150-year uninterrupted growth of rising tuition costs, I think this step is long overdue.
Yeah, and Dave, you've said before, like colleges cannot just continue to go on paying charging 60, 70, 80,000. People are not going to pay it, you
Correct.
know? And we're seeing that pushback. So here's one of the things that the article said. And by the way, this is a pretty hot off the press article. It came out May 21st, 2021. So this is not like, 2017 article or something like that. So here's a quote from the article. It talks about the number of colleges, undergraduate schools next year that are either freezing or lowering their costs. And it is a combination of public and private schools that are doing this. Um, it's not just certain type of schools. So here's some of them. Um, Arizona, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, North Carolina, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia, University of the Ozarks, William and Mary, Wabash, American, Arizona State, Auburn, Augustana, Butler, Clemson, Marquette, Northern Arizona, Old Dominion, Purdue, Radford, TCU, Texas Christian, okay, and the whole California and the Georgia State University systems, okay? And if you go back and look at tuition, undergraduate tuition and fees in the fall of this year rose by the lowest amount in 3 decades. So sure there were some that had increases, but this year was the lowest increase across the board in 3 decades. So one of the changes is either freezing tuition, or in some cases having, maybe you want to do a 3% increase, you do a 0.5% or 1% increase. And there are also a number of schools that decided to decrease their costs. We did a series on this before, tuition resets. Rider University is cutting their undergraduate tuition by a fifth. Fairleigh Dickinson by a quarter on their New Jersey campus. University of Akron lowering the cost of housing by 30%. So the first thing schools they're doing to push back is saying we need to be more competitive with cost. What's your second one, Dave?
Well, I just wanted to add in,
Sure.
this point comes into such much sharper relief when we compare the cost of college tuition in the United States to other countries. Mark, you and I have often mentioned Canada, where the cost of education is 10 to 20% of that of the United States, depending on the program. It is different on certain programs. If you go over to Europe, the cost in many countries like Germany, higher education is free, or it's a fraction of the cost of the U.S. And so when foreigners look at the cost of U.S. education, particularly if they're from Europe, it's just unimaginable that we could have allowed education to get this far out of sync with the market forces.
All right, and I'll mention something else. You gave me a really good opportunity to throw something in that I never shared last week. Our regular listeners heard the college spotlight we did on Trinity College and their partnership with Columbia and the dual degree program.
Part, yes.
The Trinity College part is less than half the cost of the Columbia part, and that's for people outside the EU. So you're looking at around 23,000, 24,000 for tuition. As from someone coming from here to go to, a world-renowned university for the first 2 years. So right away, there's substantial savings there.
Just a little segue. We didn't have a chance to talk about it, Mark, but you get a chance to get into a world-class institution at a much significant decreased academic competition, and you get to spend 2 years in Europe, and you get to have a tuition discount. That's a trifecta bargain. So, folks, that is truly a hidden gem. Anyways.
So thanks for throwing that in. And I just want to say something. Let me go off script for a sec here. our regular listeners are probably hearing the name Jon Marcus quite a bit lately. Jon Marcus was the one who wrote the article last week. Dave and I talked about us losing men. And there are a number of people that are just outstanding when it comes to higher ed in terms of writers. And our regular listeners know who they are because you'll hear me come back to them over and over again with, the people that we talk about when we have these articles. And some of those names include familiar names that our regular listeners are used to hearing, such as Scott Jasek of Inside Higher Ed, Jeffrey Salingo, a name you'll hear quite frequently, comes up a lot from the Chronicle of Higher Education. You have my old colleague Brennan Barnard at Forbes. We have a number of people, including next week, where we're looking at Melissa Korn from the Wall Street Journal, and Anna-Mona Hartakolis of the New York Times, and Daniel Douglas of Washington Post. That's just a half a dozen or so outstanding college admission writers that you'll hear us frequently have cite articles from. But there's no one, in my opinion, that I like more than Jon Marcus of the Hechinger Report. And so I was just going back and looking at all the amazing articles he's written. You can expect to hear his name quite a bit coming up because everything he has written has been just rock solid. With that, Dave, you want to transition to our second point?
Yes, this is huge. Reduced dropout rates. And Mark, I can't think of any other market institution that could afford to lose 40% of its customers on a yearly basis and still remain in business. So the second part of getting the 36 million Americans who have never finished their degrees back into the marketplace is huge.
Yeah, and it's really interesting watching some of the creative things that colleges are doing to decrease their dropout rates. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit, coming up in my interview with Andre Phillips, who's the director of undergraduate admission at University of Wisconsin-Madison, because we're going to get into summer melt and what schools can do to decrease summer melt. But schools are doing a lot of things right now, and they're things that they probably should have been doing all along. Some of those things are creating smaller seminar-style freshman experiences, going to LLCs, learning living communities for freshmen, where some of them in the dorm, where you bond with your students in the dorm, you take a class with people in the dorm, beefing up their advising, absolutely beefing up their advising and making that, hiring a lot more advisors and putting more effort into advising. And one of the things schools are doing very effectively is using text message apps. And at KIPP, we've invested in some text message apps. So we can constantly keep in touch with people with text messages, give them all the updates that they need to do. But schools are realizing, like, it goes back to my illustration. Dave had 150 clients in his law and service business. He's down to 30. He can't lose anymore. So you got to watch your price, the first thing, and then do what you can to increase your retention. What's your number 3, Dave?
They are better connect academic offerings to workplace demands. And Mark, let's not connect to an article that we did just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we talked about how schools are beefing up their internship programs. We've talked in their career centers. We certainly have talked about, and the article talks about this. The article talks about the political divide between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to valuing college. The percentage of people that say that college is a value now is down to 57%, the lowest it's been in decades. But there's a huge political skew there between Republicans and Democrats. But what it does is it forces you to have to prove your ROI. And so it forces you to have to come up with programs that you can prove a track record that we can place you in jobs. Now, there's a danger in becoming so overly professional or job placement oriented that you don't develop thinkers. But schools have a long ways to go in this area. So I commend the move to do everything they can to show that, not just by marketing, but by actual substance, that, yeah, this is what you invested and this is going to be the return on the investment. Okay.
And now number 4 is making it easier to transfer.
Yeah, and not one of the ways they're making it easier to transfer is they're accepting more transfer students. And they're also removing some of the barriers for transferring. You know, Dave, this isn't even the articles because it's so hot off the press, but it just came out this week that, now this isn't a college thing, but this is something that's being done on the federal level, that one of the biggest problems you had with people that filled the FAFSA in the past is that I'm forgetting the name of the word. Hold it. Okay, I remembered it. That they got asked to be verified. It's called FAFSA verification. And it was something that was particularly targeting under-resourced families, particularly people that fill out the Pell Grant, because the Pell Grant is government money. And so a lot of people were being told, go back and do this and do that. And a lot of people just didn't do it, because it was too complex. It was overwhelming. They didn't have anybody to guide them. That process has been made significantly easier just this week with a big announcement, changes to the verification process. Now, that's something that's happening on the national level. But part of why the Department of Ed came out and said they're making the changes is because they see the college numbers going down. They see the precipitous drop. And they know a lot of people, when they get the verification notice, just don't end up completing that information. So that's something on the national level. But going back to your point, transfers, you're making the process easier for transfers. That involves a lot of things. And it means extending deadlines. I'm noticing a lot of schools are moving their transfer deadlines much later into the year so more students can do it. Going to rolling admissions for transfer applicants and accepting more transfers. I'll tell you, Dave, I've been really impressed with how well the transfer students that I worked with this year, how well they did. They got in some incredible schools that would have been incredibly difficult for them to have gotten in right out of high school. But the transfer acceptance rate is already noticeably higher than the overall acceptance rate, and the transfer yield is higher than the transfer yield is noticeably higher than the freshman yield. And for those of you who are new, yield is the percentage of accepted students that accept your offer. So if you're in admissions and you accept 100 people, do 70 enroll or do 10 enroll? If 70 enroll, you have a 70% yield. If 10 enroll, you have a 10% yield. Transfer yield is like 57%. And first-year freshman yield is like 32%. So it's like a 25% gap. And so schools are catching on to that and accepting more transfers and making it easier to transfer.
And Mike, that seems to be such an easy solution. I make the analogy, if you are a landlord and you have vacancies, well, one of the best ways to fill your vacancies is to poach from your surrounding apartments. You know that there's going to be people who are not going to be happy with either their landlord or their living situations. If you can reach out to them and fill your vacancies with other people's dropouts or other people's tenants who are not happy, that can offset dropouts or vacancies of your own. So that
you
is
poacher. How are you poaching over there in Hyde Park, man? You knocking on doors and saying, "Come to my place." What's your poaching strategy?
We give granite countertops.
There you go.
Better dorms.
Dave did. He told me a while ago. He said those white kitchens don't sell anymore. I got to redo everything, stainless steel everything, granite countertops. That's just what you have to do in this market. I remember you redid all your stuff and did granite countertops and stainless steel. So, hey.
Granite is the new Formica.
You know what, though? But think about it. That is very analogous to a school up in their game to attract kids. And what's your fifth one?
The fifth one is, and we've talked about this before, adapt to the needs of older adult and untapped markets. Shout out to University of Phoenix and University of Southern New Hampshire.
The article talks about this, and this is something that people don't realize. There are more non-traditional students than traditional students. They're more non-traditional than traditional. Non-traditional students can't get up, leave, go halfway across the country and live in a dorm. But they can take some online courses, in the evening after they get off work. And so schools are really trying to move into that model, that hybrid model. And now the article does point out that people like Southern New Hampshire and people like University of Phoenix, they do have a first mover advantage. Purdue Global Education. there's others, Arizona State. There's others that they haven't cornered the market because the market's huge, but there's others that there's still stiff competition when you decide to swim in this ocean is what I'm trying to say. But it's such a big ocean that there's untapped market share, and schools are realizing that we can no longer just think of a traditional bricks and mortar 18-year-old come live on our campuses. We can't do that if the vast majority of potential students would never, ever attend school in that format. So what are our takeaways, Dave?
The takeaways that I have is that education is like making a fine bottle of whiskey. You start with a very diluted
I never know where you're going to go. You were bikinis last week. Okay. You're poaching clients this week, and now you're throwing in whiskey.
Whiskey, like a single
Okay,
bottle.
finish your point with whiskey.
With whiskey. I mean, what we have to do is we have to evaporate a lot of the water until we distill a fine vintage of wine or whiskey. And so I think that education, I think, honestly, the quality has been diluted throughout the years because the institutions have gotten fat and lazy, and they've taken a lot of things for granted. Now, as the enrollment declines, educational institutions have now got to up their game on multiple fronts. And there will be casualties. There's definitely going to be institutions that will not make it, other institutions that will merge. But I'm hoping at the end of this funnel, at the end of this distillate, we end up with a better educational process that's giving a better product and is more responsive to the customers than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and I want to close with do a full circle with my admissions tip. Really take it upon yourself to look at the enrollment numbers for the schools you're considering. That is a very good indication, a quick proxy as to whether or not they're in a healthy position.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, friends, before we kick off our Princeton Review countdown that our regulars you're getting used to, Lisa's got a little interesting background with this Princeton Review list, and I thought I'd have her share that. So why don't you share your experience here, Lisa?
I had the pleasure of listening to the chief editor of the Princeton Review, Rob Franick, speak at my daughter's high school college Palooza program a couple years back. And he was just phenomenal. He was so encouraging of the kids. I was there with two kids, one of whom was mine, who did not want to be at college Palooza, and they found him incredibly engaging. They were laughing and clapping by the end. And he really gave the message that college is easier to get into than ever, except for like just a tiny handful of schools, and that kids should not just focus on that tiny handful of schools, but focus on all of the wonderful schools that are in this country. And it was very encouraging and uplifting.
And one of the reasons I wanted Lisa to share that is that's part of why we're doing this countdown. I want people to expose people to some schools that they maybe never heard of. Same reason why we do college spotlights on schools other than just the most prestigious, although we know people want to hear about them, so we sprinkle those in as well. And so Lisa was telling me that he made the point. Look, we've got 386 colleges in this book. They're all fantastic. Doesn't mean they're all right for you, but they're all fantastic schools, and that's consistent with our message. Is that there's several hundred fantastic schools in this country, not a couple dozen. So, having said that, we promised something last week, Lisa.
Oh, yeah. Is that a dorm?
Exactly. So for those of you who didn't listen, this is based on student rating their dorms in their residence halls. And, they were just simply asked to rate their dorm, on a 1 to 5 scale based on how good it is. And so you do that with close to 400 people, you get some interesting results. So here we go. In other words, if it's not clear, these dorms suck. Just to break it down, according to the students, at least
who live there. Yeah, right.
I do have to say, I have to give a caveat. I still want to give a caveat on this, and that is that dorms can vary so widely that if you're talking to people that happen to be in one dorm versus another, because I see at least one school on here that I know has some good dorms, they just happen to have some bad ones too. Mm-hmm. So take it as a little bit of fun and slightly with a grain of salt. But here we go. City CUNY Hunter, which the city New York schools aren't much for their dorms because New York real estate's so expensive. So CUNY Hunter is number 20 in New York, New York. Then we got the University of Maine and Orono, Maine. Number 18, St. Mary's College of Maryland, St. Mary's City, Maryland. 17, MTSU is what we call it here, Middle Tennessee State. in Murfreesboro. Then we've got University of Miami and Coral Gables are up to 16. 15, Xavier University in Louisiana. I actually had a student that was there that transferred partly because they didn't like the dorms.
It's just
on
that bad,
one.
huh? I
Yeah.
can't take it anymore.
Yeah. 14, Nixon School, Whittier College in Whittier, California. Big announcement. I'm so excited. I don't know if you know, Lisa, I was supposed to go to Decemberfest, which is this big event a lot of us college counselors like to go to for a week in California and Los Angeles, where we visit 9 colleges, all expenses paid, and you can't even apply for it. You just have to be invited in. So I don't know who invited me, but somebody sent me an invitation. This was last year. And then COVID canceled it. And so I just got a notice this week, Decemberfest is back on.
That's
So I'll be
fantastic.
spending a week in Los Angeles visiting 9 schools. And I thought of it because Whittier is one.
Mm-hmm.
So is Caltech. You know, all 5 of the Claremont colleges, Harvey Mudd, Pomona, Scripps. I mean, I've been to a lot of these schools before, but I've never been to Caltech in Pasadena. So I'm kind of excited about that. And then another one that's on the list is Redlands, which I've always wanted to get to as well. Claremont McKenna. So anyway, coming to sunny California, I'm coming your way. But let me get back to the list. Number 13, Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago. Have you been on that campus, Lisa?
Yes, I have. And it is one of the, I'm sorry, Illinois Institute of Chicago is one of the ugliest campuses I have ever been on. And, I say that like my father-in-law taught there, my husband lived there. And
now you're talking about Illinois Institute of Technology, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is not to my taste at all. So.
Your father-in-law taught there. I learn new things about you every day. Sorry. I hope your admission director is not listening to this.
I'm sorry. I mean, maybe it looks different now, but no.
That was a little PR cleanup move.
Yeah.
You just left Chicago. I doubt it's changed. All right, let's keep it going. 12, Naval Academy, Annapolis. 11, Coe College, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 10, Stetson in DeLand, Florida. That's a gorgeous campus. 9, Manhattanville College, Purchase, New York. 8, Rider University, Lawrenceville, New Jersey. 7, Stevens Institute of Technology, right? Hoboken, right on the New York border there. 6, SUNY Purchase, also in Purchase, New York. 5, Wagner College, Staten Island, New York. What's with New York? They can't get their dorm act together. Oh my goodness. Number 4, Clarkson, New York. And then number 3, Cooper Union, New York. So New York's dominating this list. And then the last 2, boy, I'm surprised. Simmons University, that's a women's college. That's surprising that they would be there. But they're on here, number 2. And then number 1, the Military Academy. See, they figure that these dudes need to tough it up.
Right.
And be tough. They don't need all the creature comforts. So there's our list of There Is a Dorm. So take it away, Lisa. You've got our question for the day.
Right. Well, I know this question is from Rob from Texas, and we were talking last week about specific program at Columbia that is a dual program with Trinity College in Columbia. And he asked if there are other programs like that. And so Mark did some research, and he's going to share with us some other programs that are similar in makeup to the Trinity Columbia program.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is there, you don't find very many programs at all out there like Trinity Columbia. And I want to also mention some of the reasons why you don't. Some of them has to do with just how universities are and how complex they are. And it's a pretty Herculean task to sort of get your whole systems to line up with another school's whole systems, including admissions and then courses and registration and money. Is a lot to pull that off. It takes an incredible amount of institutional will to do that. And something else just I've noticed in education, and for those of you who don't know, I come from basically a generation of educators. So 4th generation, great-grandparent educator, grandparent educator. Both my parents are educators. I have a brother and sister. My sister's been a teacher her whole life. And then I guess I have to count myself, not just because I do college counseling, but I was even in the classroom for a little while. And then now Karis is teaching Spanish. So it's just like, that's just our thing. And one thing I've noticed about teachers is they like to be in control, because when they're in the classroom, that's their realm where they're in control. And that's a lot of ways schools tend to function. They tend not to be that receptive to sort of some of the massive concessions and changes that you have to make to pull off a program like this. In fact, that's one reason why there's not that many mergers. It's just very, very, very difficult to get all the parties on board to agree. So there's several reasons why you don't see that many. Another reason why is there's been a real growth of colleges having their own international campus. Remember, we talked about that when we did the spotlight on SLU, St. Louis University.
Right, in Madrid.
Yep, SLU in Madrid. And Northeastern's got all over the place, and so many schools do. And so that's going to be logistically so much easier for them to pull off and to line all their systems together. And a lot of times with that, it's not a dual degree, but it's a 1-year immersion experience in another country. And for most people, that's going to sort of satisfy their itch for what they sort of want to experience internationally. And so that's just a much easier model for schools to go to. And if they're trying to accomplish most of what these programs are trying to accomplish. Any thoughts at all? Anything I've said so far, Lisa?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is really hard for two separate bureaucracies to coordinate enough that they could pull off a really complicated dual degree program. But I'm glad that some of them have tried.
No. I completely agree with you. And I also feel like when you said the right word, bureaucracy, that's part of what makes it so difficult, So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do need to mention some of the New York programs. You alluded to them last week, a few of them. And I don't want to spend too much on this because I know that Rob knows about them. If he knows about the Dublin program, he knows about the others, but some of our listeners may not. And so Sciences Po is really what kicked everything off. That's the first dual degree program that Columbia did. That was started in 2010. It's a bigger program, not huge. They have around 75 in a typical class where the Dublin programs, is around in the 40s typically. And so it's almost double the size, but it was the success of that program, which focuses on different areas. Social sciences and language is really, the most of the journalism is really big. And so people should know that Columbia does have other programs besides the Trinity program. Trinity program was really patterned after Sciences Po. And then I remember last week you also mentioned the Tel Aviv program. I think you mentioned that, didn't you, Lisa?
No, I think the program that I mentioned was housed in New York, but it was at the Jewish Theological Seminary school in New York. But I think they do have one also in Israel, right?
Yeah, they've got Tel Aviv University, a dual degree program that's multidisciplinary, looks at contemporary issues. And, you study at a top tier university in the Middle East, one of 8 areas in the humanities and social sciences. So, I don't want to focus too much on Columbia programs. They do have another program as well called City U. It's a joint program. This one's a little different than the others because you don't apply. You don't like sort of international students apply and domestic students apply. They tap into students already, in New York. But it still gives people 2-year experience in Hong Kong. So, so let's start out with Columbia's programs and just make it clear that they are the leader by far, and they have other programs. And in fact, Trinity really came around primarily because of the success of really Sciences Po initially. So that's Columbia. And so let's just throw that out there. But I want to get to Rob's question, and I figured if he's going to be familiar with those programs, if he's familiar with Trinity. And also Rob asked specifically if we know of anything that's kind of got a math component to it, which makes it even harder. Oh, the other thing I want to say is, there are quite a few more dual programs that you'll find in the country besides the Columbia program that focus on master's level. So kids are a little bit older. For example, the University of Arizona has over 15 different dual programs, but these are all master's level programs and some of them even doctoral level. And so I'm assuming their thinking maybe there is that people a little bit older, more mature. I'm not sure what went into their decision to focus on masters more so than bachelors, but so that's another option. You'll find some dual degree programs that focus on master's opportunities as opposed to bachelor's opportunities where kids are a little bit younger. And then, of course, there's lots of dual degree programs that are domestic dual degree, that are an international dual degree. Those are fairly abundant. But let's talk about some of the other ones that are out there, particularly with partnerships with Europe, whether they're master's level or law level. I mentioned Arizona's got 15 of them. A pretty well-known program is the University of San Diego Business Program. This is an international dual degree program at the University of San Diego, not to be confused with UCSD. It can be very confusing. You've got the University of San Diego, you've got UCSD, University of California at San Diego, and then you have San Diego State. They're all three completely different universities. University of San Diego being the private, smaller school of the three. But they do have an international master's business administration degree, as well as an international business degree. And I'm going to butcher these names, but I'm just going to do my best. Is with the WHU Otto Bessem School of Management in Germany. And students spend 1 year at each of those schools. And then the degree requirements include completing the European Management Project. You travel to Asia as part of that program. Another program is American University Washington College of Law. There's an international dual degree program. This is American University Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C. They actually have 4 different international dual degree programs, and with different affiliations. There's a degree from WCL as well as a degree from the European College Partner. And then there's a program with the University of Ottawa in Canada that awards a second Juris Doctorate degree from Ottawa. And students in that dual degree program, here's where it's going to get tough for me, Lisa. They go to Université Paris Quest Non-Tier La Défense in Paris, France. So sorry if you graduated from there. I know I butchered your name, but I'm doing my best. So, and they have actually several other dual programs, including one with instruction is in French, and so you need to know instruction is in French. They have another dual degree program attending Université Carlos de Madrid in Madrid, and instruction for that is in Spanish. Now, here's one that probably comes the closest to probably what Rob was asking about, and he's from Texas, so he may be familiar with this. I'm not sure. But Texas Tech in Lubbock has a program that's interesting, international dual degree program. It's in engineering, business, and or international affairs. Now, they've got a dual Masters of Science degree program with Whiteacre College of Engineering, partners with Jade Hotz. I can't even. I'm going to mess it up. It's just in Germany. Let me just leave it there. I'm going to try the name, but I would butcher it so badly. But the interesting thing is they also have an undergraduate component. So here's an opportunity to do business at both the undergraduate or graduate level in a partnership with Rawls College of Business in France. And so that's one that's, getting closer to math. You've got an engineering and math component, and you've got undergrad and grad. And so there's another one. And the last one that I want to mention, and this is by far the most famous program. I mean, I hear about this one more than the Columbia programs, but that's because it's older. And that is the joint degree program between William and Mary and St. Andrews. And so that is one of the really, truly few international undergrad joint degree programs with the U.S. University. And there's a lot of similarities with the Trinity College Columbia program, because you study 2 years at William and Mary, and then you study 2 years, at St. Andrews. And if you thought that Trinity College was old, starting in the 1500s, well, try 1413. How's that for age? Yes, that's true. I did say 1413. Yes, the University of St. Andrews, Scotland's most prestigious university, is over 600 years old.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so that program's been around for a long time. And then you take William and Mary, by the way, which is one of the oldest schools in this country, founded in 1693. And they've had a pretty cool partnership, for some time between those two universities. So any thoughts or comments so far, Lisa?
Well, it seems like that, if you can find one of these programs that really speaks to your area of interest, it's definitely something to try to investigate and to see if it's a good fit for you. It sounds like it's, they're not plentiful and it's not the best fit for everyone, but, it does fill a niche. And, I'm glad that they're there. And I hope that, more schools will try to figure out how to do this so that students can have these diverse type of experiences.
Yeah, and if you're someone, I counsel at least five, maybe closer to 10 students a year, probably more like 5 to 7, that they want more than just study abroad. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'll ask me about attending an international university, like just flat out going. They don't even know about two programs. It's like, I'm considering an international school, or how long can I go abroad? Those kinds of things. If you're someone who's feeling like the idea of 3 to 6 months, that's great, but I want more than that, then I would look at these programs. But I would also look at what we talked about earlier. I would also look at schools that have their own campuses.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be fantastic opportunities. Another great example of that is SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. I mean, they've got, you literally can pick and choose which campus you want to go to. They've got 2 international campuses in addition to the Savannah campus and the Atlanta campus. And literally on a semester by semester basis, you can go to any of the 4. And it just works so seamlessly together when they're all under one roof. So I admire how well, the St. Andrews William and Mary program has pulled out that seamless transition, and how well Columbia has. But I think I do think there'll be more of these because we're increasingly moving into a global world.
Absolutely.
I know I get more requests about international colleges than I ever got before. So, and also, these programs are seen as successful, and people copycat out there too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
educators are looking, wow, look what Columbia's doing. Look what William and Mary's doing. Look what Texas Tech's doing. Even that Arizona's programs on the grad level, they're growing. They keep adding more and more. That's seen as a success. So hopefully this was helpful, Rob. Didn't have a ton of new options for you, specifically for you saying if there's a math concentration. Take a look at the William and Mary program, see if it's something that's appealing to you. Take a look at the Texas Tech program. But it was a fantastic question. I really want to thank you for sending it in.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you've been enjoying the Christina Lopez interview as much as I enjoyed participating in it. And now Christina transitions to talk about Barnard. She gives a fantastic overview of Barnard College, and then she starts answering your questions that you sent in. Listen and enjoy. Well, Christina, we're going to dive right in. So I'm going to let you do that elevator pitch, that information, the Barnard overview, and then we put this interview out to our listeners. So we've got several questions sent in from parents, several from students, and several from college counselors. And we'll just do a Q&A format, but I want you to start with your Barnard overview.
All right. So Barnard College is comprised of 4 main pillars. We are a liberal arts college for women in New York City in partnership with Columbia University. Those 4 pieces, in essence, create who we are and one very unique experience. So as a small liberal arts college, we are located in New York City. We have 2,700 students or so on a 4-acre campus, grass and trees and everything there, gated community. We have about 50 different academic majors. Students can choose any of those majors and also choose minors, double minors. They can choose to double major as well. But the beauty of our curriculum is that we have the foundations curriculum, which is a really fluid curriculum. It allows some guidance, but there are many different ways to fulfill those requirements. And so they are more topical based, based in the modes of thinking. We were the first liberal arts college to include a technology and digital requirement as part of our curriculum. So, our modes of thinking include thinking through social difference, thinking locally about New York City, thinking quantitatively, thinking digitally and technically. And there are hundreds of courses across all 50 of our majors that can fulfill those courses. And so students are able to take these courses throughout their 4 years, and they can also be double counted even as part of their major. And so it allows students to really explore a wide variety of academic fields of study. I like to say, like, as a liberal arts college, you might choose a major, but you're looking at it through a prism, and all of these different academic fields of study and courses come in and start to change the light and the angle of which you're looking at it, and really creating this very interdisciplinary way of thinking about a major. Our classes are small. Our average class size is about 15 students, and we were designed to be small. So 70% of our courses have 19 or fewer students, allowing a lot of interaction with students, but also with faculty, 2/3 of which identify as women, which is about double the national average for female faculty members at a college. As a campus in New York City, it's rare to have a liberal arts college in an urban city, and we fully take advantage of having New York City as our cultural and academic and professional playground in many ways. Many of our courses utilize the city, whether that is bringing in speakers or going out into the city for research, or using any of the cultural centers and museums for our academic research and study. We have about 2/3 of our students are doing science, so science majors, and able to do research on our campus, as well as all of the medical centers in the city, as well as the Mont-Doherty Earth Institute and all of the major museums and art centers and everything throughout the city. We also use it as our professional playground, having the world at your fingertips in terms of for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And so internships galore. Our Office of Beyond Barnard, our Office of Career Development, lists about somewhere around like 8,500 internships and full-time positions for our students. For a college of 2,700 students is very, very impressive. Our students have at least one internship during their time, but the average is usually about 3 or 4 during their time at Barnard. So they're graduating with a full resume full of experience upon graduation, everything from major corporations to startup companies. As a partner of Columbia University, so we are one of the 4 undergraduate colleges of Columbia University, along with Columbia College, the School of Engineering and Applied Science, and the School of General Studies. We are the women's college because, like all of the Ivies, didn't admit women until much, much later from their founding. Columbia was the last of the Ivies to admit women in 1983. And so we always brother and sister. We were founded by a woman who petitioned the Board of Trustees in 1889 for admission into Columbia College. She wanted to study psychology, and the Board of Trustees said no, because it was inappropriate for a woman to learn psychology.
Yeah, it took them 94 years to come around, too.
Correct. So they agreed to her petition to start a college for women where women could receive the same level of liberal arts degree as the men. And so we grew up side by side. Our partnership states that we share one large course catalog. And so Barnard students take classes at Columbia, but Columbia men and women take classes on our campus as well. Majority of our departments are shared. Our faculty are tenured at Barnard, and then are also tenured as faculty of arts and sciences at Columbia as well. And so they teach on both sides of the street. We share resources as well as clubs and organizations. So Barnard students not only participate in Columbia clubs, but they also lead Columbia clubs as well. And so we are part of this Barnumbia community, as we like to say. Students are a part of both communities. But what makes Barnard so unique is the fact that we are a women's college, and we are an institution that was created for the success of women academically, professionally, and personally. And that's something that we still stand for today, even though we still have this kind of co-ed vibe with Columbia literally across the street. And we have co-ed classes because Columbia men take classes at Barnard. But in those classes, like I mentioned, 2/3 of the faculty are women. But regardless of the gender of the faculty member, it is a non-male centered classroom, right? And so professors are amplifying the voices of the female students. Many times in spaces, women feel like, especially in sciences or math, they feel hesitant to speak up. They may feel that a mistake is attributed to their gender because women are so underrepresented in fields of math and science and other computer science fields, engineering, etc. They may be hesitant to argue, debate with a male student. They may apologize for statements before they make them. That goes away in that space. Our students own their ideas and own their voice and own their academic journey and are completely unafraid to voice their ideas and opinions. They are free to take risks and make mistakes and never have them attributed to their gender. They are able to hear more regularly the contributions of women across all fields, to read articles and journals and pieces of literature that are written by women of all different identities. This is not a place where you're going to read the greats from dead white guys, as I like to say. The greatest hits. Understanding the legacy of women and how we have contributed to the formation, not only globally, but also to this country in every single field of study, is something that becomes a part of your learning and your legacy as you know that you are getting ready to contribute to that legacy. We think about the benefit of also with that in having a classroom that amplifies women's voices is that the men in those classes hear that as well, and it changes how they view women in those academic spaces. That they start to realize that there can be this equity in these spaces and respect for all voices in the space. We think about it professionally, where students are going into fields, especially women in fields that are underrepresented, thinking about how to create those spaces of support, how to navigate career moves and growth when you have many other things that you might think about, whether you want to start a family or not start a family, whether, maybe there's only one woman at the top. How do you open that up a little bit more? How do you become in a space of leadership where you might be the only? Being able to navigate all of that with a support system of alumni who have already gone before you, who are so eager to come back and mentor young students. And then lastly, you are in a space where we think about your growth. I always say that going to a women's college is an investment in your own growth for 4 years, because you are surrounded by other women who made a very intentional decision to be surrounded by other women who are going to be supportive and encouraging and empowering throughout their 4 years. You're never in competition with any other woman. You're only in competition with yourself. And the students there understand that there is this collective strength when we work together, when we are collaborative. There is a sense of understanding our own intersecting identities and learning how to amplify the voices of those who may not normally have their voices amplified, how to think in an allied way. We are very much dedicated to social justice education, and thinking about activism in the myriad of different ways, whether that's in your writing, whether that's in your research, whether that, even if it's just organizing a protest, but understanding that equity work is a piece of everything that you do, even if you're just a neuroscience, and understanding that a lot of the research that we have was just based on white men from the past. And so opening that up to now think about all genders and races, et cetera. And so thinking through how to incorporate equity into all of our work. And so it's a space where you are investing in yourself for 4 years, in a space in New York City where you have incredible resources, and a place where you have that small, close-knit community of a liberal arts college as part of a larger research institution directly across the street. So you have the best of all worlds in this nice little thing called Barnard.
You were ready for me.
Oh, yeah. I've been doing this a long time.
I can tell. That was great. That was great. So I want to ask you a million follow-ups, but this is tough for me because I'm a talker, but I'm going to exercise discipline. I promised we would let our listeners control the questions here. So every question I'm going to ask is from a listener. So the first comes from a student, and she wants to know how you would characterize the students that attend Barnard.
So first of all, I like to say that there isn't a neat little box that they all fall into, right? I'll say the one thing that is very consistent across every student is this love of learning and this curiosity that they have, this eagerness to dig a little deeper beyond the surface, to understand themselves, to understand the world around them, to understand their academic fields. They want to learn and absorb. Beyond that, I do think that they have a strong sense of community and caring for the community. There is this sense of, yes, there isn't their own self ambition, but they want to bring others along with them in that ambition. It's not like I'm trying to outrun someone else, but really a sense of like, let's run together, let's train together, let's all beat this race together. I would also say that there's a boldness that they have, and whether that is saying the thing that no one wants to say, being able to speak up in a class that might be male dominated, especially if it's, maybe it's across the street at Columbia, maybe even in going into fields where we're underrepresented, but understanding that and how and really taking on that fearlessness to navigate it. I think that more than anything, I do think that there is a sense of constantly asking the deeper questions. We love when students ask questions. Our supplement is about asking bold questions. It is this constant curiosity of themselves and the world around them that I think they all kind of possess.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, the recommended resource for episode 182 is the website Poets and Quants. That's PoetsandQuants.com. Now, Poet and Quants is your source for everything related to business schools. If you're someone who was interested in a business major undergraduate or an MBA, whether it's domestic or international, you're going to find really intriguing information. Sure, they're most known for their rankings. And you know my view on rankings. Rankings ask the wrong question. It's not how good is the school, it's how good is the school for you. And no ranking can do that. But I'm not as critical about rankings in an individual discipline as I am when they try to put the whole sauce together overall. And so you'll find everything you could ever want on business rankings, such as top MBA programs, top international MBA programs, top programs for MBAs for entrepreneurship, top undergraduate business schools, U.S. and domestic. But you also find other things on here as well. You'll find interviews with students, interviews with deans, provosts, and you'll find really helpful articles on business. For example, just looking currently, here are a couple of the articles that they have up right now. 5 biggest surprises in Fortune's first MBA rankings. 20 biggest surprises for first-year MBA students. That's on the MBA level. There's other ones such as Duke, Fuqua versus Virginia's Darden, the ultimate smackdown. So these are business schools compared. MIT Sloan versus Berkeley Haas, the ultimate smackdown. Northwestern Kellogg versus Chicago Booth, the ultimate smackdown. There's a YouTube page. There's little mini podcasts they have. There's everything you could ever imagine about business. It's a great way to learn about different business schools if business is what you want to pursue in college. That's our recommended resource for episode 182. It's called poetsandquants.com. We will now return to my interview with Christina Lopez of Barnard College. Well, one of our questions is from a college counselor on that supplement, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
in a second. That was really good. The next question, also from a student, and you've actually answered most of this. It asks if you could elaborate on the partnership with Columbia. What opportunity does it open up? What restrictions are placed on access to classes at Columbia? And so anything you can add to your previous answer?
Yeah. And so I like to say, I think a lot of times we get students who ask questions about Columbia, like, what can I do at Columbia? Or what classes can I take at Columbia? And the sense of like, which is always a little bit of what can I do at Columbia that I can't do at Barnard or vice versa? Or why would I choose Barnard or Columbia? I like to say this, we are two very different schools that share resources. And so on the student side, there's the one large course catalog, there's the sharing of departments. And so, like, for example, if you're in the English department, there's English 301 on our side, there's English 301 on Columbia side. They may differ in, obviously, faculty, they might differ in size. The classes tend to be slightly larger at Columbia than at Barnard. Maybe not slightly. They have more larger lecture courses across the street because they are designed to be larger, whereas only about 3% of our courses have 100 students or more. Our curriculums are very different, and I think that is one very distinguishing feature. But in terms of clubs, organizations, that's where that intermingling of students come in. Athletics, we are all Columbia Lions, and so we are the only women's college with Division I Ivy League athletics because of our partnership with Columbia. And so the coaches recruit for Barnard and Columbia students for all of the varsity teams, but they also have intramural and club sports as well. And so there is this kind of shared community space. And a lot of times our students say that, they have friends on both sides of the streets. There's this assumption from the outside that there's a rivalry, and there's not. A lot of times students just have friends and they forget whether they're a Barnard or Columbia student, because at the end of the day, they're all in the same clubs or they're in the same classes. And so, like, it's hard sometimes to even distinguish. But I will also say that if you're coming to, I like to think of it like this, like if you're ordering a brownie dessert, right? You're ordering it for the brownie. It might come with a side of ice cream. Because ice cream is the complement, but you didn't order the brownie dessert for the ice cream. If you wanted ice cream, you'd order a sundae, right? With the sprinkles and everything else. So Barnard is that brownie, right? So if you're applying to Barnard, it's because you want the brownie with the side of ice cream. You could probably you may not even want the ice cream. And that's the beauty of the Barnumbia community. You can decide how much of Columbia you want. Like, there are students who might take many of the courses over there, some who take very few. It's up to each individual person how much you want to engage in it. But you're there for the brownie, right? If at any point in time you're like, oh my God, I really want the ice cream, I ordered it for the ice cream, then order the sundae. Because the sundae is going to be way more satisfying than just a little bit of scoop of ice cream that you get on the side with the brownie, right? And so that's how I always help. Like, we're two separate schools with two different admissions processes. You can apply to both. You can apply to one or the other. We do not share information one way or the other. So do your research on both schools. Figure out which side of the street is right for you, and make the decision that way. But if you're applying to Barnard because you think that's going to be easier to get into Columbia, it's absolutely not. Our admit rate is 10%. But it's also sucks because then you're across the street from the school that you really wanted to go to. And that sucks for 4 years too, and so that's kind of what, not really answering the question, but like, I think giving a fair overview of the fact that we are these two very different schools, different curriculums, different cultures, different communities with shared resources in the middle.
So there's one more Barnard Columbia question. It makes sense to ask it while we're on this context. This is a parent question. I'm going to slightly change the wording, but it'll get at the same point. So if, like you said, you can apply to both. So let's say there was a student that applied to both, and let's say they got in both, and let's say they picked Barnard. From your own institutional research or just your own anecdotal experience, what would be the reasons you say they tend to pick Barnard over Columbia if given that choice?
Great question. I think our curriculums are very different. I like to think of them of opposite ends of the pendulum when it comes to how you approach the liberal arts. Columbia has the core. It's a very fixed curriculum with a very prescribed courses that students take all at the same time. That is a part of its founding, and it's a part of its values. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for exploration. It is the core. Versus ours, which is, you should take them in these areas, but you have all of these courses that you can choose and do it as you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a sense of like, you need to know this in order to graduate. So it's very two different schools of thought in that. And some students really want more choice in their curriculums. Others like to have a curriculum based in the great books where everyone reads the same books and whatnot. So it just really depends on how the student approaches it. Barnard is smaller, and so you're going to have more interaction with faculty. We don't have any graduate assistants teaching any courses on Barnard's side of the street. And there are many courses that are taught by TAs at Columbia. And so that means that when you do research with a faculty member at Barnard, you're doing it directly with the faculty member. There's no middle person there. I would also say, we're a women's college.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest
Right.
piece,
Right,
obviously,
right.
like there is this sense of a full understanding of what it means to be in this community of empowerment and confidence and wanting to be in this community surrounded by other women, where you are going to take this critical lens to gender and gender identity. And how then it opens itself up to thinking critically about all the other facets of identity as well. And so that's kind of where that personal growth as well as that academic growth comes in. But it's starting through this lens of critically thinking about gender. And I will say that there are many students who come in to Barnard with a lot of preconceived notions on what a women's college is, which is really interesting. A lot of students who went to co-ed schools assume that it's only students who went to all girls schools who go to women's colleges, and all the students who go to all girls schools don't really want to go to another all women's college, and so they think that it's all the students from co-ed schools, which is a really interesting assumption. But it is, I think, pretty much the one idea that is prevalent across all of our graduates is that they always say that it may not have been the reason that they chose Barnard, but it is the reason why they would choose it again after graduating. It was the most defining piece of their undergraduate experience and the piece that they will treasure and appreciate the most having graduated. And so I do think that creates a very tight-knit community around a very central shared experience that wasn't very intentional. You don't just like slip and fall into a women's college. You don't, it's not like, oh, I'm just choosing, a research one institution. Like, no, choosing a women's college is very intentional. Sometimes we might be the only women's college on a student's list. 9 times out of 10, that's usually the case. And so it's that experience and being connected to that community sometimes that makes students choose our site.
Fantastic. Let's go back to that college-specific question. So here's a question from a college counselor, Allison from Ohio, and she wants to know, at Barnard, academic inquiry starts with bold questions. And you know this question in your sleep, right? What are some of the bold questions you have pondered that get you excited, and why do they interest you? Tell us how you would explore these questions at Barnard. Can you elaborate on what you mean by bold in this context, is her question. So I read the whole question just because most people won't know Barnard's college-specific questions like you do. But so her specific question is, can you elaborate on what you mean by bold?
Yes. So, I think I get this question the most from students.
I knew you were ready for it.
Yeah. And it's this thing that really trips them up. Like, there's a very specific type of question that we think is bold. And quite honestly, I answer this question and say, like, as a patriarchal society, women have been conditioned to be smaller, to be a little quiet, to not ask questions, right? And so, quite honestly, having the courage to really ask questions that dig a little deeper, that question the status quo, that push back a little bit, or just having a sense of general curiosity is in of itself a bold question. The fact that you are asking a question is a bold question. And so, quite honestly, I just want to know, what do you care about? Like, what what questions do you have about anything in the world that really excites you, that you're curious about, and how would you maybe approach those things here? You know, maybe it's an academic question, maybe it's a research question, maybe it's a social issue, whatever it may be. But it's the fact that you're asking questions. And that's what Barnard students do. We ask questions. And any question that a Barnard student asks, if they're in any thoughtful way, is in of itself a bold question. So I think it's getting caught up on the bold part.
Right.
Really, it's just like, I want to know what you're curious about.
Mm-hmm. If you haven't missed it, Barnard looks for people who are intellectually curious. kind of screaming off this interview.
Can I say it again?
Love it.
We know who we are.
You know you are. Hey, that's important. Not everybody knows who they are.
Next week in the news, the hunt is on for high school graduates who left the college path. Another great article by Melissa Korn of the Wall Street Journal. Our question from a listener is, when should my child start working on her college application? Our interview is the final part with Christina Lopez, the Dean of Enrollment of Barnard, on Barnard College. And our college spotlight will be Barnard College.
See you next week, everybody.
See you next week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Motvich. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Boss. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitru. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.